Today, we continue our journey through the First Samnite War with its second major engagement, the Battle of Saticula, fought in 343 BC. Just days after their hard-fought victory at Mount Gorus, Roman forces once again found themselves deep in Samnite territory. But this time, the threat did not come from open battle. It came from the shadows, hidden within the narrow mountain passes near Saticula. Outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and surrounded, it seemed the Romans had marched straight into a deadly trap. However, the battle was not won by strength of arms, but by the daring resolve of a single Roman commander, Publius Decius Mus. In the heart of a mountain defile, his bold maneuver would snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. It is a tale of ambush, survival, and the enduring struggle between hill and plain, between Rome and Samnium. In the aftermath of their victory at Mount Gorus, Roman confidence was high. Consul Aulus Cornelius Cossus, hearing of the triumph of his colleague Marcus Valerius Corvus, was eager to prove himself. He pushed deeper into Samnite territory, determined to press the advantage. But the landscape had changed. The fertile plains gave way to rugged hills and narrow defiles, perfect terrain for an enemy born and bred in the mountains. The Samnites, masters of ambush and mobility, had not been crushed. They had simply withdrawn, waiting, watching, and preparing to strike. It was in this unforgiving landscape near the town of Saticula that Roman fortunes would again be tested. Cossus led his army through a narrow pass, unaware that Samnite forces had already occupied the high ground above. The trap was set. As Cossus led his forces through a narrow defile near the town of Saticula, the enemy lay in wait. Samnite warriors had taken the high ground, their positions hidden among the ridges. The Romans had marched straight into a trap. Escape was nearly impossible. The towering cliffs hemmed them in, and the Samnites were ready to strike. As the Roman column advanced, figures emerged on the slopes above, javelins glinting in the sun, slings whirling overhead. The exit was sealed. There was no room to maneuver, no space to form battle lines. Panic rippled through the ranks. The army was trapped in a killing ground. In that moment of crisis, one man stepped forward, Publius Decius Mus, a young military tribune with a daring plan. Scanning the terrain, he spotted a key oversight. The Samnites had left one nearby hilltop unguarded, overlooking their own camp. Realizing the only path to salvation, Decius approached the consul with a bold request to lead a detachment of volunteers, seize the unoccupied height, and launch a diversionary attack to threaten the enemy camp. If successful, it might draw the Samnites away from the main defile and give the trapped Romans a fighting chance. With the consul's approval, Publius Decius Mus selected a detachment composed of hastati and principes from one of the Roman legions. These were among Rome's younger and more agile infantry, ideal for the difficult climb ahead. Moving swiftly and with discipline, the detachment advanced up the unguarded slope. The Samnites, focused on the trapped Roman column below, failed to notice the movement until Decius and his men were nearly at the summit. By the time the alarm was raised, it was too late. The appearance of Roman soldiers on the heights overlooking their camp threw the Samnite ranks into confusion. Fearing an attack from above, or worse, the presence of a second Roman army, the Samnites faltered. The distraction was all the Roman consul needed. With the enemy's attention split, Cossus seized the opportunity to pull the Roman army back from the defile and reposition on more favorable ground. With the consul and main army safely repositioned, the Samnites turned their full attention to Decius and his isolated detachment. Encircled on the hilltop, the Romans now faced a new danger: survival. The Samnites surrounded the heights but hesitated to launch a direct assault. As night fell, uncertainty gripped both camps. Surprisingly, no attack came. Seizing the opportunity, Decius descended quietly with a handful of centurions to reconnoiter the enemy lines. In the darkness, they crept between pickets, noting gaps and weaknesses in the Samnite cordon. Returning to his men under cover of night, Decius outlined a bold plan. They would attempt to break through, silently if possible, violently if necessary. Under the stars, the Roman detachment moved like shadows, threading their way between sentries and patrols. For a time, the escape went unnoticed. But then a cry broke the stillness as the Romans were spotted. Without hesitation, Decius roared out a battle cry, echoed instantly by his men. The sudden noise shattered the Samnite camp's fragile calm. In the confusion, Decius led a ferocious charge, cutting through the startled enemy. The startled Samnites were thrown into chaos, caught off guard by the sudden assault. In the confusion, the Romans hacked their way through the enemy lines, breaking free from what had seemed an inescapable trap. At dawn, the Roman camp erupted in celebration. Against all odds, Publius Decius Mus and his men had returned safely, their breakout now the stuff of legend. But there was little time for rest. Riding the momentum of Decius's daring escape, the consul Aulus Cornelius Cossus, at Decius' urging, ordered a full assault on the unsuspecting Samnites. The enemy, still disoriented from the night's events, were caught completely off guard. The Roman legions struck with fury. The Samnite lines collapsed with remarkable speed. As panic spread through their ranks, many attempted to flee, but with no clear route of escape, disorder turned to disaster. The Roman forces pressed the advantage, swiftly overrunning the enemy camp and cutting down those who attempted to resist. Ancient sources claim that as many as 30,000 Samnites were killed in the ensuing chaos, though such figures are likely exaggerated. Regardless of the precise numbers, the outcome was decisive. The Romans held the field, and their victory was complete. What began as a desperate attempt to avoid annihilation had become a resounding triumph, achieved through a combination of strategic improvisation, bold leadership, and the disciplined resolve of Rome's soldiers. While ancient sources portray Decius Mus as a heroic savior, modern historians have questioned the reliability of this account. Our primary source for this episode is the Roman historian Livy, who wrote centuries after the events took place. In Book 7 of Ab Urbe Condita, Livy devotes considerable attention to the bravery of Publius Decius Mus, describing how he led a daring breakout through enemy lines to save the Roman army. But even Livy himself acknowledged that this story strongly resembles another incident, one that occurred much later, in 258 BC, during the First Punic War in Sicily. In that case, a Roman military tribune performed a nearly identical act of heroism to rescue a trapped army. This similarity has led scholars to suspect that Livy, or his sources, may have duplicated or reshaped the story to fit a literary pattern. In 1967, historian E.T. Salmon pointed out several additional parallels between the Battle of Saticula and later Roman battles, raising the possibility of what scholars call doublets, repeated story elements across different historical events. However, not all scholars agree. In 1998, S.P. Oakley challenged these doubts and leaned toward accepting that 3 separate battles took place during the First Samnite War. He argued that while similarities exist, they do not necessarily prove invention or error. It's also important to consider Livy's broader style. His narrative of the Samnite Wars often includes ambushes, surprise attacks, and heroic rescues, motifs that some critics see as formulaic. But given the mountainous terrain of Samnium, where narrow passes and ambushes were a military reality, these patterns may simply reflect the nature of the conflict itself. In the end, the tale of Publius Decius Mus may well have been embellished over time, shaped to mirror Rome's ideals of courage and self-sacrifice. But that doesn't mean it's pure fiction. It's entirely possible that Decius did perform some extraordinary act of bravery in 343 BC, one that was remembered, retold, and eventually mythologized into the version we have today. The victory at Saticula significantly bolstered Roman morale and enhanced the Republic's military prestige. Within the span of just a few days, both Roman consuls, Marcus Valerius Corvus at Mount Gorus and Aulus Cornelius Cossus at Saticula, had secured major victories. These successive triumphs not only demonstrated Rome's growing military capability, but also its ability to adapt under pressure. Strategically, the defeat at Saticula dealt a severe blow to Samnite confidence. Though the First Samnite War was far from over, The battle revealed the limits of even well-prepared ambushes when faced with disciplined and determined Roman resistance. Moreover, it reaffirmed Rome's readiness to carry the fight into the heart of enemy lands, sending a clear and unmistakable message to both allies and rivals throughout the Italian peninsula. As the campaigning season of 343 BC drew to a close, Rome prepared for one final strike. The decisive confrontation would unfold near the town of Suessula, where Marcus Valerius Corvus would once again take command against a large Samnite host gathered for a final stand. But that is a story for another day.